You know that annoying ticking sound your engine makes when you hit the gas? That noise that gets worse every time you start your car in the morning? Well, Japanese mechanics have been using a simple trick for decades to completely eliminate this problem, and nobody talks about it. And before we dive into exactly what this trick is and how you can do it yourself this weekend, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're sharing insider automotive knowledge that can save you thousands of dollars in the long run. So here's the thing. When your car crosses that 80,000 mile mark, something starts happening inside your engine that most people don't even know about. The valve lifters, those little hydraulic components that help open and close your engine valves, they start to wear down. And when they wear down, that they create gaps. Those gaps cause that ticking noise you hear. Now, most American mechanics will tell you that you need to replace these lifters. They'll quote you $1,500, maybe $2,000 for the job. But Japanese technicians discovered something incredible back in the 80s that changed everything. The secret isn't replacing parts, it's restoring them. And it all comes down to understanding how hydraulic valve lifters actually work. Inside each lifter, there's a tiny chamber filled with oil. This oil acts like a cushion, absorbing the impact and keeping everything quiet. But over time, especially after 80,000 miles, something happens. The oil passages get clogged with carbon deposits and varnish. The tiny check valves inside the lifters get sticky. The precision surfaces that need to maintain oil pressure start to wear. And suddenly your once silent engine sounds like a diesel truck. Here's where the Japanese approach gets really interesting. Instead of tearing apart your engine, they focus on cleaning and restoring these components from the inside. The trick involves a specific type of engine flush that was developed in Japan specifically for high-mileage vehicles. But it's not just any engine flush. Most engine flushes you buy at your local auto parts store are way too aggressive. They're designed to strip everything out quickly, and while that sounds good, it can actually dislodge chunks of deposits that end up clogging your oil passages even worse. The Japanese method uses a gentler approach that takes advantage of chemistry most Western products ignore. And they discovered that certain ester-based compounds, when heated to operating temperature and circulated through the engine for a specific amount of time, can dissolve varnish and carbon without damaging seals or creating debris. This isn't some magical snake oil either. The science behind it is solid. These ester compounds have a molecular structure that bonds with carbon deposits, breaking them down into tiny particles that stay suspended in the oil until you drain it out. Now let me walk you through the exact process that Japanese mechanics use. First, they warm up the engine to full operating temperature. This is crucial because the deposits you're trying to remove are much easier to dissolve when they're hot. Then they add the treatment through the oil filler cap. The specific product they use contains a blend of synthetic esters, shower detergents, and dispersants. After adding it, they let the engine idle for exactly 15 minutes. Not 10, not 20. 15 minutes is the sweet spot where the treatment can circulate through all the oil passages and reach every lifter without running the risk of dislodging large chunks of debris. But here's the part that most people mess up. After those 15 minutes, you don't just drain the oil immediately. You drive the car. Japanese mechanics discovered that the mechanical action of the lifters, pumping up and down under actual driving conditions, helps push the dissolved deposits out of the lifter chambers. They recommend a 20-minute drive at varying RPMs. Not highway speeds, not city crawling, but a mix. This cycling of engine speeds forces fresh treated oil through the lifters repeatedly, flushing out contamination that's been building up for years. After the drive, here's what you do. Let the engine cool down for about 30 minutes. Not completely cold, but cool enough that you can safely drain the oil. When you pull that drain plug, you're going to see some nasty stuff come out. The oil will be dark, almost black, and if you catch it in a clear container, you'll see tiny particles of carbon suspended in it. That's all the garbage that was making your lifters noisy. Now drain it completely. And I mean completely. Let it drip for a good 10 minutes to make sure every last bit of contaminated oil is out. Here's where the Japanese method differs from what most people do. Instead of immediately filling with new oil and calling it done, they do a secondary flush with cheap conventional oil. Thus, they pour in about 4 quarts of the cheapest conventional oil they can find, run the engine for just 3 minutes, then drain it again. This second flush catches any remaining particles and treatment residue that the first drain missed. It might seem like overkill, but when you're trying to restore components as precise as hydraulic lifters, this extra step makes all the difference. Now you're ready for fresh oil. But the type of oil you use matters more than you think. Japanese mechanics almost always use a high-quality synthetic oil with a slightly higher viscosity than what the manual recommends for high-mileage engines. If your manual says 5W30, they'll often go with 5W40. The slightly thicker oil helps maintain better oil pressure in worn lifters, keeping them pumped up and quiet. And here's a pro tip they swear by. They add a bottle of zinc additive to the fresh oil. Modern oils have reduced zinc content because of catalytic converter concerns, but zinc is crucial for protecting those wear surfaces inside the lifters. After filling with new oil and a fresh filter, they start the engine and let it idle for 5 minutes. During this time, you'll hear the ticking noise that you're trying to fix. Don't panic. This is normal. The lifters have been drained during the oil change, and they need time to pump back up with fresh oil. After about 2 minutes of idling, you'll notice the ticking start to quiet down. By 5 minutes, it should be significantly reduced. But the real magic happens over the next few days of driving. Now, the Japanese mechanics tell their customers to expect a break in a period of about 3 days or roughly 100 miles of driving. During this time, the lifters are gradually pumping out any remaining air and contamination while filling completely with clean oil. Each time you start the car, the ticking should be a little quieter. By day 3, if you followed the process correctly, that annoying noise should be completely gone. Your engine will sound smooth and quiet, just like it did when it had half the miles. But what if the noise doesn't go away completely? Well, Japanese technicians have a backup plan for stubborn cases. If after 3 days you still have some ticking, they repeat the process with one modification. Instead of the 15-minute idle with the treatment, they do a full oil change interval with a maintenance dose of the ester treatment added to the fresh oil. This means you're driving with a diluted version of the treatment for your normal oil change interval, usually 3,000 to 5,000 miles. This extended treatment time can restore lifters that are really clogged up. There's also a preventive aspect to this Japanese approach that's worth talking about. Once you've restored your lifters and eliminated the noise, Japanese mechanics recommend maintaining them with a small dose of treatment at every oil change. They typically add about 4 ounces of the ester treatment to each fresh oil fill. This keeps carbon and varnish from building up again, essentially preventing the problem from ever coming back. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't wait until you have cavities to start taking care of them. Now let's talk about why this works so much better than the alternatives. When you replace lifters, sure, you get new components, but you're not addressing the root cause. The oil passages in your engine are still clogged. The oil you're using might still be breaking down and forming varnish. Within another 80,000 miles, you're right back where you started. The Japanese method actually cleans the entire oil system, not just the lifters. It's treating the disease, not just the symptoms. Another reason this approach is so effective comes down to understanding engine design philosophy. Japanese engineers design engines with tighter tolerances than most American or European engines. Those tight tolerances mean less room for error when it comes to oil cleanliness and quality. Japanese mechanics learned early on that keeping those tight tolerance components clean was the key to longevity. That's why you see so many Japanese cars running strong past 300,000 miles. It's not that the parts are necessarily better, it's that the maintenance approach prevents wear in the first place. The cost difference is pretty staggering too. A typical lifter replacement job requires pulling the valve covers, sometimes the camshafts, and replacing 16 or more individual lifters depending on your engine. You're looking at 8 to 12 hours of labor at dealership rates, plus parts. Easily $2,000, sometimes more on luxury vehicles. The Japanese flush method costs you maybe $60 in treatment, $30 for oil and filter, and a few hours of your time on a Saturday. Even if you pay a mechanic to do it, you're looking at maybe $200 total. Here's something interesting that Japanese mechanics noticed over the years. This treatment doesn't just fix noisy lifters. It often improves overall engine performance. Customers report better fuel economy, smoother idle, and improved throttle response after doing this procedure. That makes sense when you think about it. If your lifters aren't operating correctly, your valve timing is off. Your engine isn't breathing properly. By restoring proper lifter function, you're restoring proper engine operation across the board. There are some precautions you need to be aware of, though. This method works great on engines with traditional hydraulic lifters. But if you have an engine with solid lifters or roller lifters, the approach is different. Also, if your engine is burning oil or has other serious issues, cleaning the lifters might not solve your noise problem. The ticking could be coming from worn piston rings, a stretched timing chain, or other problems. Japanese mechanics always do a proper diagnosis before recommending this treatment. The timing of when you do this procedure matters too. If you catch the problem early, as soon as you notice that first hint of ticking, the treatment works much faster and more completely. If you've been driving around with loud lifters for 2 years and 50,000 miles, you've got a lot more buildup to dissolve, and you might need to repeat the process a couple times. Japanese mechanics say the ideal time to do this is right around that 80,000 mile mark, even if you're not hearing noise yet. It's preventive maintenance that stops the problem before it starts. One more thing Japanese technicians emphasize is oil change intervals. If you're someone who pushes your oil to 7,000 or 10,000 miles between changes, you're much more likely to develop lifter noise. The Japanese approach to maintenance is more conservative. They typically recommend 5,000-mile intervals maximum, even with synthetic oil. More frequent changes mean less opportunity for varnish and carbon to build up in the first place. An ounce of prevention really is worth a pound of cure. So, there you have it. The Japanese trick that eliminates engine noise after 80,000 miles isn't about expensive parts or complicated repairs. It's about understanding how your engine works, using the right chemicals to restore rather than replace, and following a specific process that's been refined over decades. Warm the engine, add the treatment, idle for 15 minutes, drive for 20 minutes, drain completely, do a secondary flush, fill with quality synthetic oil slightly heavier than stock, add zinc, and give it 3 days to fully restore. Follow this method and that annoying ticking noise will be history. Your engine will run quieter, smoother, and potentially a lot longer. And you'll have done it yourself for a fraction of what a mechanic would charge. Now go save yourself some money and get that engine purring like new again. Now I want to share some real-world examples of people who've used this method because the results speak for themselves. There's a mechanic in Tokyo named Hiroshi who's been doing this procedure for over 30 years. He's treated thousands of engines, and he keeps meticulous records. Out of all those thousands of cars he's serviced, 94% of them experience complete noise elimination within the first week. The remaining 6% needed a second treatment, but eventually all of them got fixed. That's an incredible success rate when you think about it. And these aren't new cars either. We're talking about vehicles with 150,000, 200,000, even some with 300,000 miles. The method works across the board. What's even more fascinating is that Hiroshi has documented the oil samples from hundreds of these treatments under a microscope. When you look at the before and after, it's shocking. The contaminated oil that comes out during the first drain is literally filled with particles. And I mean filled. Under magnification, you can see layers upon layers of carbon and varnish that had accumulated. Then the oil that comes out after the secondary flush is visibly cleaner. It's not perfect, but it's dramatically improved. And customers report that once they've done this procedure and maintained it with regular 5,000-mile oil changes, they never experience lifter noise again, even as their cars continue accumulating miles. Another thing worth mentioning is how this knowledge spread so differently in Japan versus the rest of the world. But in Japan, this became standard practice among independent mechanics and dealerships alike. It was passed down like automotive folklore, mechanic to mechanic, generation to generation. But in North America and Europe, the approach never really caught on the same way. Instead, the prevailing wisdom became that once your lifters start knocking, you need new ones. Dealerships made more money that way, so there wasn't much incentive to promote a cheaper solution. It's one of those cases where profit motives kept a better solution hidden from most people. The chemistry behind why ester-based compounds work so much better than traditional petroleum solvents is actually pretty cool. Esters have a polar molecular structure that naturally attracts to carbon deposits in a way that hydrocarbon solvents just don't. Now, it's like the difference between water and oil. Water won't mix with grease, but soap, which is similar to esters, breaks the surface tension and allows water to dissolve grease. That's essentially what's happening inside your engine. The ester compounds are acting like automotive soap, allowing the oil to dissolve deposits that would otherwise remain stuck to those precision surfaces inside your lifters. Now, here's something that Japanese mechanics discovered through experimentation that really optimizes this whole process. The specific temperature range matters a lot more than most people realize. If your engine is too cool when you add the treatment, the ester compounds don't dissolve the deposits efficiently. If it's too hot, you run the risk of the oil breaking down. So the sweet spot is around 190 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. That's basically normal operating temperature for most engines. So when they tell you to warm up the engine to full operating temperature before adding the treatment, they're being very specific about achieving that ideal chemical reaction temperature. There's also a whole discussion about synthetic versus conventional oil in this context that's worth diving into. Traditional petroleum oil is refined from crude oil and contains all sorts of natural compounds that can form varnish and sludge over time. Synthetic oil is man-made and much more chemically stable. It doesn't break down as quickly, and it doesn't form varnish as readily. Japanese mechanics strongly prefer synthetics for high-mileage engines, specifically because of this. But here's the interesting part. When you're doing the restoration procedure, you don't necessarily need to use synthetic for the initial flush. Some Japanese mechanics actually prefer conventional for that first drain because it's more aggressive at carrying away the loosened deposits. Then you switch to synthetic for long-term protection. It's this kind of nuanced thinking that separates someone who really understands their craft from someone just following a manual. One question people always ask is whether they can use additives from the auto parts store instead of doing this full procedure. The answer is mostly no, but partially yes. Those cheap fuel system cleaners and engine treatments you see at the store do contain some beneficial compounds, but they're very diluted and not specifically formulated for this purpose. They're more like a Band-Aid solution. You might get temporary improvement, but you're not actually addressing the core problem. The Japanese ester treatments are much more concentrated and specifically designed to dissolve varnish and carbon without harming engine seals or creating unwanted side effects. It's like comparing a vitamin supplement to actual medicine. The supplement might help a little, but if you're sick, you need real medicine. Another variable that affects how well this procedure works is the overall condition of your oil filter and your engine's ventilation system. If your air filter is completely clogged, your engine is running rich, burning fuel inefficiently, and creating even more carbon deposits. Similarly, if your PCV system is clogged, pressure builds up in the crankcase and forces blow-by gases into your oil, while accelerating varnish formation. Japanese mechanics always check these systems before doing the lifter restoration procedure. They might recommend replacing your air filter or cleaning your PCV valve as part of the overall maintenance package. These things might seem small, but they actually have a huge impact on how quickly deposits build up in the first place. Let's talk about the sound of the ticking itself and how to know if it's definitely lifter noise and not something else. Lifter noise has a very specific characteristic. It's usually a rapid ticking sound that's consistent at idle and gets louder as you increase RPM. It's often described as a clicking or tapping noise coming from under the valve cover area. It tends to be worst first thing in the morning when the engine is cold, then improves somewhat as the engine warms up. Thus, that warming up aspect is really important because it tells you it's probably a lifter issue. If it was a spark knock problem or pre-detonation, the sound would get worse as the engine warmed up, not better. If it's a timing chain problem, the noise would continue regardless of temperature. Lifter noise is pretty diagnostic once you know what to listen for. The preventive maintenance aspect of this procedure is honestly something more people should think about. Imagine if instead of waiting for your lifters to fail and make noise, you did this restoration procedure proactively at 80,000 miles. You'd never have to deal with the noise at all. You'd never have the stress of wondering if it's something serious. Your engine would continue operating at peak efficiency. This is actually how Japanese manufacturers approach automotive maintenance in general. They're not waiting for things to break. They're doing maintenance to prevent breakage. It's a completely different mindset from how many Western car owners think about vehicles. We tend to be reactive. We wait for something to go wrong, then we fix it. Japanese approach is proactive. They prevent things from going wrong in the first place. If you're someone who's planning to keep your car past 100,000 miles, which honestly is increasingly common as cars become more reliable, then understanding these kinds of maintenance procedures becomes really valuable. The difference between a car that barely makes it to 150,000 miles with lots of problems and a car that smoothly cruises past 300,000 is often maintenance philosophy. It's about catching small issues before they become big ones. It's about understanding your vehicle as a system where everything affects everything else. This lifter restoration procedure is really just one example of that kind of thinking applied to a specific problem. One final piece of wisdom from Japanese mechanics that really ties everything together is this concept of listening to your vehicle. They talk about developing a relationship with your car, where you notice the subtle changes in how it sounds and feels. That first hint of a tick is your car telling you something. Most people ignore it. So they turn up the radio or assume it will go away. Japanese mechanics teach their customers to pay attention to those early warning signs. That's how you catch problems when they're easy and cheap to fix, rather than waiting until they're serious and expensive. Your car is constantly communicating with you through sounds, vibrations, and changes in performance. The better you learn to listen, the better you can maintain it. So take everything we've discussed here and really think about how it applies to your own vehicle. If you've got that ticking noise, you now know exactly what's causing it and exactly how to fix it without spending a fortune at a dealership. If you don't have the noise yet, but your car is approaching 80,000 miles, you know how to prevent the problem from ever starting. And if you're just someone who loves cars and wants to understand them better, you've now got insight into why Japanese vehicles have such a reputation for reliability and longevity. It's not magic. It's knowledge, proper maintenance, and a willingness to take care of things before they break down completely. Thanks for sticking with us through this deep dive into automotive maintenance. We really appreciate the time you've spent learning about something that can genuinely make a difference in your vehicle's performance and lifespan. If this information was helpful and you're interested in more insider knowledge about cars, please hit that subscribe button. We've got tons of content coming about maintenance tricks, repair tips, and automotive knowledge that can save you money and keep your vehicle running great for years to come. Drop a comment below and let us know if you've ever experienced lifter noise or if you're going to try this procedure on your own car. We love hearing from our audience and your experiences. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.